the sky above New Delhi turned red. Not with sunset, but with alien ships. Sleek, black, and silent, they hovered like hunters deciding where to strike first. The Zarnathi had come to Earth not for peace, but for control. They thought humans were weak. Their weapons looked old. Some even used wood and bullets, things the galaxy left behind centuries ago. Pathetic, said Commander Vraktuluan through his voice modulator as he watched footage of human soldiers preparing below. They still use gunpowder. He gave the order. Dozens of dropships flew down. Inside were Zarnathi shock troopers, each one armored in living metal that could absorb energy blasts. They carried plasma blades and sonic cannons. They expected to win fast. But then something strange happened. The first wave entered the city. Buildings loomed over narrow streets. The aliens moved forward, scanning for targets. Then the walls spoke. Old brick walls, some built during British rule, cracked open. Hidden inside were tiny guns, miniature railguns no bigger than a fist. They fired guided slugs faster than sound. One shot took off a soldier's head. Another pierced the fuel line of a hover bike. Everywhere, the buildings fought back. In another part of the city, an old farmer stood on his rooftop. He held a rifle made in 1943. It looked worn, almost useless. He aimed. Fired. The bullet split midair into hundreds of tiny drones. They swarmed around corners, seeking body heat. One by one, Zarnathi soldiers dropped, their armor cut from the inside out. Colonel Ajay Rao stepped forward from behind a broken wall. He wore a uniform older than most wars. On his belt was a knife passed down for generations. But the blade shimmered. It was lined with nanorazors so sharp they could slice through quantum shielding. This isn't just a war, he told his men, reloading his pistol, a revolver from the 1800s, now firing magnetic rounds that could punch through steel. This is a lesson. Above, in orbit, Vraktuluan watched the battle unfold. What is happening? He demanded. His science officer trembled. Their weapons, they look old, but they are not. The truth hit him hard. Humanity had never stopped evolving. They just hit it well. Their rifles, tanks, and planes looked outdated, on purpose. Beneath the rust and tradition lay the deadliest tech in the galaxy. And now it was turned on the Zarnathi. Back on Earth, Rao raised his hand. A signal lit up the sky. From every direction, more humans came. Farmers, teachers, students, each carrying weapons that looked like museum pieces. But each weapon was a trap. Each bullet, a surprise. As the aliens tried to retreat, Rao smiled. They thought we were easy prey, he said. They forgot one thing. He raised his old rifle again. Humans don't forget how to fight. In the frozen fields of Siberia, snow covered everything, trees, ruins, and the remains of old war machines left behind decades ago. The Zarnathi thought it was junk. They were wrong. As their hover tanks rolled through the tundra, scanning for life signs, the ground beneath them shifted. Without warning, rusted metal arms burst from the earth like zombies waking up. Old Soviet artillery pieces, buried for years, rose on mechanical legs. Their barrels glowed red-hot. Then they fired. The shells screamed through the sky, faster than any modern missile. Mid-flight, they split open, releasing clouds of glowing dust. It wasn't just shrapnel, it was nanotech, invisible to sensors, designed to eat through alien armor like acid through paper. Zarnathi soldiers screamed as their suits turned against them, tiny machines crawling inside joints and wires, shutting down systems one by one. Back in command centers across Earth, human generals watched with calm eyes. "We told them," said General Liu from Beijing, watching live feeds from around the world. "We never throw anything away." In the skies above Cairo, ancient biplanes took off. They looked like flying wood and cloth, leftovers from World War I. But when they dove toward enemy ships, their wings glowed. Each plane carried hidden fusion cores. Each bullet was a smart round that could change direction mid-air. One old P-51 Mustang took down 3 alien drones before looping back like a ghost. On the ground, in Texas, a group of teenagers fought beside older soldiers. They wore mismatched gear, some had Civil War-era muskets, others held spears or even bows. But these weapons weren't what they seemed. An arrow shot into the air. As it flew, it split into smaller darts, each one guided by AI. They struck Zarnathi soldiers in the eyes, necks, and weak spots in their armor. A boy named Marcus reloaded his crossbow and grinned. "My granddad made this," he said proudly. He said one day we might need it. Across the globe, the same story played out. Old tanks rolled out of museums. Fighters flew planes built in the 1940s. Soldiers marched with rifles from past wars. And every single weapon worked. Commander Vraktuluan watched from orbit as more of his ships exploded. His face twisted in anger. "This is not possible," he growled. "They should not have this power." His science officer shook. "They hid it," she whispered. "For centuries, they made us think they were weak. That they hadn't changed." Vraktuluan stood silent. Down below, Colonel Rao stood on top of a ruined tower, watching the sunset. "Humans don't forget," he said quietly. "We adapt. We survive. And when you come for us..." He raised his rifle again. "We remind you why you should never underestimate a species that still believes in the sword, and knows how to make it bleed." In the deep waters of the Atlantic Ocean, an old submarine drifted silently through the dark. It looked like it belonged in a war museum, rusted hull, faded markings, and a name barely visible on its side, USS Liberty. But inside, it was anything but old. Rows of glowing screens lined the walls. Holographic maps floated above the command table. The crew moved with quiet confidence, their eyes focused on alien ships moving above them. On the bridge, Captain Elena Volkov stood tall. Her uniform was patched, her boots worn, but her voice was sharp. "All systems online?" she asked. "Fully charged," replied the weapons officer. Volkov nodded. "Then let's show them what happens when you forget to look down." She pressed a button. Outside, the ocean lit up. From hidden bays beneath the sea floor, dozens of ancient-looking torpedoes launched. They looked like World War II-era models, slow and simple. But they weren't built to chase targets. They were built to drop. As they sank, they opened like flowers, releasing small metal spheres into the water. These spheres spun rapidly, sending out pulses of energy that disrupted gravity fields and scrambled alien tech. Above, Zarnathi hoverships began to shake. Their sensors went wild. One by one, their shields failed. Then came the real surprise. From below, massive rods fell from orbit, silent, fast, deadly. Each one was made of tungsten, longer than a train, and packed more force than a nuclear bomb. They hit the enemy ships like fists from the sky. Back aboard the Liberty, the crew cheered. "This is for Pearl Harbor," Volkov said with a smirk. Meanwhile, in the skies over Sydney, the battle took a new turn. Zarnathi flyers had begun to retreat after heavy losses. But then they spotted something strange: children running across a field, holding kites. They laughed. Until the kites flew straight up. Each kite was made of ultra-thin carbon fiber, nearly invisible. Inside was a tiny engine and a payload of micro-drones. As they rose, they scattered into swarms, entering the engines of enemy fighters and shutting them down piece by piece. A little girl named Aisha watched from the ground, holding the string of her red kite. "They thought we didn't have air power," she said proudly. We just like flying. Across the world, humanity kept surprising the invaders. In South Africa, miners used pickaxes and shovels, not to dig for gold, but to activate hidden underground railguns that fired EMP shells into the battlefield. In Brazil, farmers drove tractors loaded with old grenades, each one now filled with smart gel that could melt alien armor in seconds. And in London, Colonel Rao stepped into the ruins of Big Ben, where a group of engineers worked around an ancient-looking cannon mounted on a rotating base. It looked like a Victorian relic. But as the cannon fired, a beam of pure energy shot into the sky, striking a Zarnathi command ship dead center. Rao smiled. "Some things," he said, "just get better with age." Above the earth, Commander Vraktuluan stared at the battlefield with growing disbelief. His forces were losing. Not just retreating. Being destroyed. Humanity wasn't fighting like a primitive species. They fought like ghosts, striking from nowhere, using old weapons that somehow worked too well. His science team was in chaos, trying to understand how simple bullets could split mid-air, or how ancient ships and planes could still fly, let alone win. "We must retreat," his second-in-command suggested nervously. "Regroup. Study their tactics." Vraktuluan growled. "No. We finish this now." He gave the order, "Activate the Kethra pulse." From the command ship, a signal spread across the sky, a powerful jamming wave designed to shut down all enemy communications, targeting systems, and power grids. It hit Earth like a hammer. All over the planet, screens went dark. Radar blinked off. Fighter jets lost control. Tanks stalled. For a moment, it seemed like victory was finally within reach. Then, from the ruins of Berlin, a single voice crackled through the silence. "This is Colonel Rao. If you can hear me, keep fighting. Don't wait for orders." Soldiers across the world nodded and kept moving. Because they had trained for this. Without radar, without satellites, without fancy tech, they fought the old way. In Nairobi, a sniper named Juma adjusted his handmade scope and fired. One shot. One kill. No digital help. Just skill. In Tokyo, fighter pilots flew by instinct and memory, dodging enemy fire like dancers in the sky. And in Moscow, General Petrov stood on top of a broken tank, pulling out a radio that didn't rely on satellites or wires. It ran on code. A hidden message, passed from generation to generation, never written down, never stored digitally. Only spoken. Only remembered. As he whispered into the radio, other hidden units across the globe activated. Old war machines, buried beneath deserts and forests, rose again. They moved without signals. Without commands. Just programming built into their steel bones. Volkov, aboard the USS Liberty, smiled as she saw new blips appear on her sonar. "They're back," she said quietly. Back in orbit, the Zarnathi commander watched in horror as the tide turned once more. "Impossible," he muttered. "We cut their network." His science officer shook her head. "No," she whispered. "They never needed one." On the battlefield, Rao led a final push toward the alien landing base. He raised his rifle, not for show, but for sound. A bugler beside him lifted an old brass trumpet and blew a long, echoing note. It was the charge of the cavalry. Across the world, soldiers heard it, and charged. With bayonets. With blades. With fists wrapped in fire. Because humans didn't just fight with tech. They fought with heart. And as the Zarnathi began to fall back, one thing became clear. This wasn't a mistake. It was a warning. Never underestimate a species that still believes in the past. Because sometimes, the old ways are the deadliest. The Zarnathi were losing. Badly. Commander Vraktuluan stood frozen on the bridge of his command ship, watching as reports poured in, ships destroyed, soldiers overwhelmed, tech neutralized. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were winning. And they were doing it with weapons that looked like junk. He turned to his science officer, voice low and furious. "How?" he demanded. "Their tech should not be this strong." The officer trembled. "It's not their tech, sir. It's their people." Vraktuluan didn't understand. Not yet. But he would. Back on Earth, Colonel Rao led his squad through the ruins of what used to be New Delhi's central market. Fires still burned. Alien bodies littered the ground. And from every direction, more humans arrived, farmers, students, teachers, even old war veterans who hadn't held a rifle in decades. They carried everything: swords, spears, muskets, bows, and even slingshots. But none of them were useless. A young woman named Anika stepped forward, holding an old bow made of wood and carbon fiber. She knocked an arrow tipped with glowing blue liquid. "Ever heard of nanopoison?" she asked before firing. The arrow hit a Zarnathi soldier in the neck. Within seconds, the alien's armor began to melt from the inside out. Rao smiled. "She makes those at home." In another part of the city, a group of kids had taken over an old toy factory. Now, it was a weapons lab. They built tiny drones shaped like birds, bees, and even butterflies, each one armed with micro-explosives or tracking systems. One boy launched a dragonfly drone into the sky. "They can't see us," he said proudly. "But we see them." Above, the skies filled with more surprises. Old fighter planes, some from World War II, flew alongside modern jets. Their engines had been upgraded. Their bullets were smarter than ever. Some even fired EMP rounds that fried enemy ships mid-flight. In the Pacific, Captain Volkov watched from the USS Liberty as ancient torpedoes did something no one expected: they learned. Each one adapted mid-water, changing course based on enemy movement. One even faked a miss before looping back and hitting its target from behind. "These things are alive," her XO whispered. "No," Volkov said. "They're smart." On board the Zarnathi flagship, panic grew. Every weapon the aliens used was countered. Every shield broken. Every strategy predicted. "Human tech is too advanced," one officer said. "We must retreat." "No," Vraktuluan growled. "We learn." He ordered a full data download on human weapons, tactics, and history. What he saw chilled him. Humans had fought wars for thousands of years. They had survived famine, fire, plague, and betrayal. They had built empires, torn them down, and built again. And through it all, they kept their old weapons, not because they couldn't make new ones, but because they learned from them. Every rusted rifle, every worn-out tank, every hand-forged blade told a story. And now, those stories were fighting back. As the final Zarnathi dropship exploded over Cairo, Rao stood tall. "This wasn't luck," he said, looking up at the burning sky. "This was history." And across Earth, humans cheered, not just for victory, but for the truth. You don't beat humanity. You only make them angrier. Commander Vraktuluan stared at the data screen in silence. It showed centuries of human history, wars, battles, weapons, and tactics. He had expected to see chaos, disorganization, weakness. What he saw instead made his blood run cold. Humans never stopped fighting. Not just against enemies, but against nature, hunger, disease, even their own kind. And through it all, they learned. They adapted. And most terrifying of all, they remembered. Every weapon they used wasn't outdated. It was perfected. Vraktuluan turned to his science officer. "They didn't forget how to build new weapons," he said slowly. They chose not to show them. She nodded. They're real tech, it's hidden inside old designs. Like wolves in sheep's clothing. On Earth, Colonel Rao stood on top of a ruined tower in New Delhi. The battle had moved west, toward Mumbai. His squad was tired, hungry, but still ready. "Sir," said a young soldier, handing him a worn notebook. "We found this in the old archives." It belonged to General Malik. Rao opened the book. Inside were hand-drawn sketches of rifles, tanks, planes, all built decades ago, but with notes about upgrades hidden inside. Every page told the same story: humans never threw anything away if it could still fight. He smiled. That man always knew what was coming. In Siberia, a group of engineers worked fast beneath the snow. They had uncovered something ancient, an old Soviet tank buried for over 50 years. Its cannon looked like it came from World War II, but when powered up, it fired beams of energy that tore through alien armor like paper. A girl named Nadia climbed onto the turret. She was only 16, but she handled the controls like a veteran. "This thing is amazing," she said. "Feels like it was waiting for us." Across the world, more secrets were waking up. In Egypt, desert tribes unearthed old tombs, not for treasure, but for weapons. Hidden beneath pharaohs' graves were rifles, grenades, and drones disguised as archaeological tools. In Texas, farmers used tractors to dig up underground bunkers filled with retrofitted muskets, bows, and even crossbows loaded with explosive bolts. And in London, a single message spread across every battlefield: "If you think we're weak because we use the past, you've already lost." Back aboard the Zarnathi flagship, Vraktuluan watched as another fleet was destroyed above Japan. His officers begged him to retreat. But he refused. Instead, he gave a new order: capture a human engineer alive. He wanted answers. What he got changed everything. The prisoner, a woman named Dr. Leela Desai, was brought before him. Her uniform was torn, her face bruised, but her eyes burned with fire. "You want to know our secret?" she asked. "Fine. We don't throw things away because we believe in second chances. In comebacks. In fighting back harder than you ever thought possible." She leaned closer. "And now you've seen it." Vraktuluan stared at her. And for the first time, he feared humanity. Commander Vraktuluan stood frozen as the last Zarnathi warship exploded above New York. Smoke filled the sky. Fires burned across the city. But below, on the broken streets, humans cheered, not with fear, but with pride. They had won. Not with flashy tech or alien weapons. They had won with heart, with memory, and with weapons that looked old, but were anything but. Colonel Rao stepped forward, rifle in hand, watching the burning ships fall like stars. Behind him, soldiers, farmers, teachers, and even kids walked through the ruins, victors of a war they were never supposed to win. Volkov arrived by hovercraft from the coast, her uniform covered in soot and battle marks. She looked at Rao and smiled. "Told you we weren't done," she said. Rao nodded. "Never are." Back in orbit, what was left of the Zarnathi fleet tried to flee. But Earth wasn't done either. From hidden satellites came a final strike, not nuclear, not energy-based. Old rockets. World War II style. Painted red and white like warning signs. But inside? Smart metal. Nanotech. And one message. Don't come back. As the rockets launched, Vraktuluan finally understood. Humans didn't need the latest weapons to be deadly. They made do with what they had. And made it better. He turned to his remaining crew. "We leave," he said. "We warn the others." His science officer asked, "What will you tell them?" He looked down at the blue planet below, where fires still burned and humans still stood. "I'll tell them this: humanity is not weak. They are not outdated. They are not prey. They are hunters. On Earth, the survivors gathered in what was left of New Delhi's central square. A large screen lit up, broken, but working. It showed a message from every nation, every city, every soldier who fought. Today, we proved that strength isn't about how new your gun is. It's about how much you believe in what you're fighting for. A young boy raised an old sword. One passed down through generations. His hands shook, but his voice didn't. We didn't forget our past, he said. We used it. Around him, people cheered. Across the galaxy, word spread fast. Never attack Earth. They still use swords, but those swords can cut through stars. And somewhere, deep in space, a single Zarnathi escape pod floated away. Inside, Commander Vraktuluan sat in silence. He held a single human weapon in his hands. An old pistol. Still warm. Still loaded. Still dangerous. He whispered one last thing before vanishing into the dark. Next time. He paused. We bring more ships.